Mr. McCrae, could you take your video off, please? Good morning or afternoon at this point. We do have quorum and the live stream is going. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats of communication supports for council, standing our advisory committee meetings, and information upon request. To make requests for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make a public request to this meeting, please contact cwc@london.ca. It being noted that London City Hall is currently closed to the public due to the provincial legislative closures. As I call this meeting to order, looking for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Chair. With respect to, pardon me, there's, I thought I had that right at hand, Chair. I apologize. I will, I'll declare it as I come across it. It has to do with some zoning related issues. I'll come back to that. I apologize for taking your time on that.
Madam Chair, if I might be helpful, it might be a file number 4 on the Deferred Matters list for Mayor Helmer. Or Mayor Holder.
I was thanks very much for the memory of that, and that's exactly what it was intended to be. So thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Teamwork always serves us well.
And has been past practice so as not to get into any additional delays. I may recuse myself from that section of the agenda, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Looking for any further disclosures of pecuniary interest? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move into 1.2 and the election of vice chair for the term ending November 30th, 2021. I have had no advanced notice of candidates seeking interest, so opening the floor now for interested parties. Okay, Councillor Cassidy is interested. Is there any others?
Madam Chair,
oh, yes.
I wanted to nominate somebody. I'm not interested.
Okay, please proceed.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Turner for vice chair.
Thank you. Your worship, your hand's raised.
It is. Happy to second that, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Is there any further nominations of oneself or someone else? Okay, seeing none, Councillor Turner, would you allow your name to stand for the position of vice chair?
I'd be honored to do so. Thank you to the nominator.
Thank you, Councillor Turner, for accepting. We will call the vote in eScribe. In eScribe, so be sure to have that open as we are getting ready to vote in that now.
Madam Chair, I forgot to sign into eScribe, so I will vote yes and sign in right away.
Perfect, thank you.
And Chair, I'll be voting yes. I'll be voting yes. I'm not sure that I'll be able to sign into eScribe from my office here. I'm having some challenges, but we'll work through it.
Perfect, thank you. So for those using eScribe, it is open.
Councillor Turner, thank you. Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Perfect. Thank you for that, and congratulations, Councillor Turner, and thank you for serving. Moving on to the consent items, I have not been given any advance notice of anything to be pulled, so looking to committee now for your wishes of pulling any of the items of 2.1 through to 2.8. Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to comment on 2.4 if I could.
So comment but not pulling?
Well, I'd like to ask a question. Let's put it that way. Comment and question.
Okay, well, we'll pull that just in case. Councillor Helmer?
2.8.
Thank you, noted. Anything further in addition to 2.4 and 2.8? Okay, seeing nothing further, that leaves 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.5, 2.6, and 2.7 on the floor. Yeah, so I need a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Helmer, were you moving? Yes, Councillor Helmer has moved and Councillor Van Meerbergen has seconded. Turning to committee for questions, Councillor Helmer.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, a question about the implementation of the traffic and parking bylaw changes that are recommended. One of the areas that's identified to go down to a lower speed limit is in Ward 4, and residents in the area are quite keen to see that happen. And I'm just wondering if staff would comment about the timing for implementation should this be approved by council.
Thank you for that. And Mr. McRae, is this one for you?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, the implementation of the area speed limits is an ongoing phased process. Due to the amount of signage, it does take some time. So I can't commit to specific timing, but I would say that within 3 months, and in particular before the upcoming construction season, when I know that the pressures in this area grow, the signs should be in place, and we'll look to prioritize that area as much as possible.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Councillor Helmer, do you have a follow-up question on that or any other item?
Just a comment on 2.7. I appreciate that it's moving as quickly as it can. I know residents are really looking forward to seeing a lower speed limit on the residential streets in this part of the city. We're in a situation where when we started with the area speed limits just across the street in Woodfield, the speed limit is lower. And as soon as you cross into the other side of Adelaide, the speed limit is higher. And people are very keen to see that be the same on both sides and to have the lower speed limit in this area. So really glad to see it going ahead. I wanted to say thank you very much to the staff for moving as quick as they can to to bring these areas forward. I know we're doing it in a kind of piecemeal fashion, but I think having it be contiguous, expanding it, building onto the areas that have already been lowered is a really smart way of doing it. And I think people are really finding it to be a positive improvement in the neighborhoods. Thanks very much.
Thank you for those words. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple quick questions. One with respect to 2.3 and the Huxley Street closing. This one's in Ward 11. I've had a few inquiries about this in the past, and so normally I don't get inquiries about these kind of things well in advance of any of these plans. So when I saw it pop up, it seems like it might be something of interest. There are several apartment buildings that abut the extension of Huxley over to Baseline. It's a very well-used pedestrian pathway and connector to the Baseline Road services. In the report, it identifies that an easement will be maintained for a walkway. Just looking for a bit of comment on what that realignment might be and what the public communication plan is to communicate that to the residents, especially in those apartment buildings that might not receive a statutory notice as they're not property owners in that circumstance.
Thank you. To staff then from planning in regards to the walkway easement and public consultation plan.
Hi, it's Mike Pease here from Development Services. A bit of an precarious position because we don't actually have a development application before us. With the resolution that was provided as part of the 2000 resolution and what's here before the committee today, you mentioned, and that is correct, that there is an easement provision for a walkway. That will be maintained as part of any future development application. It's a 10-foot wide public walkway over private land. In terms of a public notification, it's not something that Development Services, I would say, get into in terms of road closing. Obviously, we do our own notifications for public processes such as rezonings and minor variances and things like that. I may look to my colleagues, specifically maybe Mr. McCrae, if there's anything that has been done historically with road closings in terms of notification, and we can work together to come up with a strategy. We'll echo that there has been some commentary and comments that have come to us because with anything, there's always rumor mills happening in the community, and they've caught wind, I would say, of some things, and had some discussions as early or as late as about an hour ago with the representative of your community. So there will be communication and something we can look at, maybe a larger strategy. The goal through the development application would be to sign it as well to make sure that it is acknowledge that it is a public pathway that is over private land. So there's still more to come, especially the fact that we don't actually have an application before us, and working on a strategy is something that we can certainly come up with.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Mr. McCrae, did you want to add anything in onto that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think Mr. Pease has got it covered. Given the uncertainty with respect to the timing of the next steps, I think it's best that we just commit at this time to have a coordinated approach and communicate in the best manner possible based on the timing that we learn about potential future development.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Turner, a follow-up to that item or anything further?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. That's helpful, and I appreciate that. I flag it more just to make sure that that is part of whatever the plan is at the appropriate time. It might not be associated with the road closure itself, but to the development application. However it works out, if that access to the right-of-way ends up changing, then I think it needs to be well communicated to renter residences rather than just the statutory notice associated with development applications that goes to owners of properties. So just to keep that in mind. And the second question I have through you, Madam Chair, is with respect to item 2.5, the appointment of a consulting engineer. And through you to staff, I'm just wondering, as a cyclist, this is an intersection I pass fairly frequently and use as I come off of Oxford and head down Gideon. And there's talk of the different options that might be incorporated into that. I just want to make sure that there's an active transportation lens to the intersection changes, that it's not just solely vehicular traffic.
Thank you. Mr. McCrae, could you please respond?
Yes, certainly. Thank you for the comment. It's a good reminder, and it's a focus that we take on all of our projects, that we want to focus on all modes, and active transportation is certainly included in past designs. We've certainly endeavored to do that, and that would certainly be a focus given the context of this location and the development surrounding it.
Thank you, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. I raise it also just out of experience on some of the other roundabouts in the northern end of the city. As you leave down Wonderland, it becomes very confusing for cyclists. It's challenging to navigate, and so an improvement on the design would be much appreciated for cyclists as navigating through roundabouts and county roads.
Thank you. Looking to other members of the committee for any comments or questions on the consent items that are currently moved and seconded. Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question on 2.2, the proposed expansion of the W12A landfill site. I'm wondering what the timeline is for receiving approval from the ministry for the expansion. So I know we've followed all of the steps that we've been required to follow, and I know we have terms of reference that have been, I believe, approved by the ministry and all of that, but I wonder about the final approval for the expansion itself. What timeline are we looking at there?
Thank you for that. I always appreciate questions for W12A, as it's also in Ward 12. Mr. Stanford, could you please give an update as we're closing in on the EA and where we're at timeline-wise?
Thank you, and through the chair, we will shortly be bringing to the Civic Works Committee the Environmental Assessment Study Report, and that represents the draft conclusion of the EA. That document would be somewhere in the late March, early April timeframe. It is currently sitting with the Ministry of Environment, Parks and Conservation. We're waiting for their comments on that particular draft before we can bring it forward to the Waste Management Working Group and to Civic Works. Subject to that moving at a reasonable pace, we will be submitting the final EA through committee and council to the minister late this year. Then it follows a process where it does go out for another round of comment run by the provincial government, and then comments are received, and then we anticipate a decision, let's say in Q2 of 2022.
Thank you, Councillor Cassidy. Do you have a follow-up question for that, or are you, okay, perfect. You're pleased with that. And Your Worship, you have a comment or question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Relating to 2.6 in the Springbank Dam, I acknowledge the appointment of the consulting engineers, and I saw the costs associated with it. And I was struck by when this is all settled with what is intended to be done, that there's some significant funds left over, and wonder as it relates to the river related projects, what the plan is with the access. If this is not the appropriate place to ask that question, I can ask it later, but it strikes me that since the figures are in the report, it would be useful to have a sense where we might, beyond the appointment of engineers, what we intend to do with those funds.
Thank you. Mr. Mathers, for a reply, please.
Through the chair, at this point, the design will be moving forward. We have an estimate for the approximate value of the additional work that's required that came out of the EA process, which is approximately $2.2 million. However, we haven't confirmed that through detailed design. So we may be fairly close to the funding that's remaining in the account. Right now, there's just over $3 million remaining. As part of the follow-up report, when we bring back the tender, we can maybe discuss how we could use that additional funding, but we're not anticipating a huge surplus coming out of that final detailed design and the tender and the construction moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. See no further follow-up. If there's any last questions, if not, we'll open the voting for those using the e-scribe, and those who are unable to can vote verbally. Okay, calling the vote.
Chair, if the vote is up, I've got eScribe up, but it's not coming through. I'll vote yes, but I will work to get eScribe back in place.
Okay, thank you. Noted.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Perfect. Okay, moving on to item 2.4, as was pulled by Councillor Van Merbergen. If Mr. McCray maybe want to speak to where we're at in this endorsement of a legal process, and then we can open it up for questions.
Certainly, Chair. This is a project that is being led and managed by the Ministry of Transportation. At this point, there is a legal requirement to legally close some of the roads, and due to realignments as shown in the map in the appendix. And out of courtesy, the Ministry of Transportation has requested the endorsement of the municipality, given where it is applicable to our roads. But it's a cooperative, mutually beneficial project with safety benefits. So we see this as a good initiative and are certainly cooperative from a staff perspective.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Van Merbergen. Questions or comments in regards to item 2.4?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and thanks to Mr. McCray for giving us that backgrounder on this. I think this is a good news story on two fronts. One is, of course, the interchange itself is going to become modernized, improved, easier for access and egress for motorists. But over and above that are the surrounding roads to the interchange itself. Now, the province has proposed these realignments, and I guess my question for Mr. McCray is, would he agree that with what the province is proposing, and would he agree that this is a significant improvement?
Mr. McCray?
Yeah, this is certainly a complex interchange, and the process throughout the environmental assessment and all the public consultation that it encompassed really brought forward and worked through many complicated issues with respect to the best layout of the interchange and also the surrounding municipal road network. So I think the goal of an environmental assessment is to come out with the best possible design and mitigate any impacts. And so we're confident that the environmental assessment for this project was successful in that regard.
Thank you, Councillor Van Merbergen. Any follow-up questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you for that. It seems to me that this is going to maybe bring a sense of additional order to that particular area near the interchange. And that's going to be a big improvement because the area currently is somewhat chaotic. So again, I think this is good news. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins, welcome to the Civic Works Committee, and please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing me. This is in my ward, and it has been an ongoing conversation since I became a councillor back in 2014, the need for these improvements. And I understand this, it's a ministry-led project, and the community has been very involved in the process. And it's good to see the endorsement coming from the municipality now. Through you, I do have a question, and it may be premature, I'm not sure, but it's just having a better understanding of when this is going to come forward. As you know, the southwest part of the city has many projects, developments going on, and just coordinating some of these projects, I think is can be a challenge, and we'd like to know a little bit more of what the community can expect with the timelines of this. It's good to see that access will, the local access will still continue with these road closures. People will still be able to access their businesses and properties, but just again, coordinating projects and understanding a sense of timelines for this project coming forward.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Mr. McCray, respond to the councillor, please.
Yeah, through the chair. So the timing is dependent on the Ministry of Transportation. So any of my comments would be speculative. But what we do know is that they are actively working on the project. There were some delays throughout the environmental assessment process just due to the complexity of it. But that has been successfully completed and resolved. So the Ministry of Transportation has indicated that in the coming year that they plan to initiate the design process that also includes the property acquisitions. And so those, in particular, the property acquisition process can be variable with respect to duration. So I can't say for certain when the timing of construction would be, but I can say that MTO has indicated that they're actively working on the project.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins, a follow-up question or comment?
Yes, if I may. Thank you for that, Mr. McCray. I know that the community is asking when this project is coming forward, and I would like to just follow up and ask, how would the Ministry of Transportation advise the municipality and therefore the community as to where we are with this project? What is that process?
Mr. McCray?
At an administration level, where we are in touch with the Ministry of Transportation on an ongoing basis, just to the intertwined nature of the project and its overlap with municipal infrastructure. The contact points for the province with respect to public notification are similar to those of the city, in that their environmental assessment process spills over and includes public notifications. It is a slightly different environmental assessment process, and it's got a different class process approach. But again, the goals are similar, so I can't comment in specific. But suffice to say that there will be notifications, and then as city staff are able to supplement that and bring awareness to council and the community, we certainly will endeavor to do that.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Hopkins, are you satisfied, or do you have a follow-up?
No, thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Looking for any further comments or questions in regards to item 2.4? Seeing none, we will now open the vote on the MTO road closure of Highway 401 at Highway 4. Sorry, I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Cassidy is a mover, Mayor Holder is a seconder. The vote will now be opening on eScribe.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 2.8 as pulled by Councillor Helmer. Looking for questions that you wish to raise through staff.
Thank you. Through the chair, I wanted to ask specifically about the cost compared to the budget for this area. It's quite a bit over, and I wonder if staff could just comment on the pricing that we received for the purchase. Certainly see the need for the vehicles, but the budget and the cost is a concern for me.
Thank you for that. To staff for a reply of the cost.
Thank you, and through the chair, it's Jay Stanford here. We are seeing more and more of this, where prices for heavy duty vehicles are coming in over the original estimate. That's occurring for a variety of reasons, everything from the exchange rates we're seeing, environmental control systems that are required in Ontario now for vehicles, and plus just the tariffs and other pressures coming in from many of these vehicles are US vehicles coming up into Canada. Fortunately, over a number of years, we had a number of projects that came in under budget. So all this money comes out of the a vehicle fund, where we're able to actually use money from previous year's budgets to help reduce the cost when these situations occur. So this is not uncommon, and our reports are sort of very consistent with reporting out on when we do have the overage and how it will be funded from which capital accounts. We work with finance on these matters to make sure that our source of financing clearly captures the information to ensure that we are have the appropriate amount of funds. What we've been doing to try to lower our costs is, for example, in this particular report, as you see, we packaged together a number of vehicles over a number of years and went out for a larger request for proposals. What we have here actually is a very good price where the best value is also the best price. We have a request here to purchase 4 vehicles in 2021 with future years still subject to meeting our budget requirements, but awarded to the same contractor. Therefore, what we have here is actually a very good price, but you are correct, Councillor. We are over budget, but it is managed within the overall budget.
Perfect. Thank you. A follow-up, Councillor Helmer?
Thank you very much. In terms of the pricing for those future years, you think it's going to be fit within what's in the multi-year budget? Now, I just want to make sure I fully understand what you said there at the end, Mr. Stanford.
Through the chair, yes, these are all part of the multi-year budget, and as we move forward, prices will vary by individual vehicles because it meets the needs of that particular service area and how they use a particular vehicle. And that's why you see the variation in the actual price here between Unit 1 and Unit 4. It varies by what is added onto those vehicles. We will be sitting down with the vendor each year to negotiate the best possible price for each unit, as well as the individual service area, to ensure that the items that are being required on those vehicles haven't changed. So there's a number of things that we do each year to make sure that we keep within the overall budget, which is something that we are at this point in time.
Thank you. Councillor Hummer, any follow-up on that, or you're okay? We're okay. Okay, looking to other committee members in regards to questions on item 2.8 for the medium-duty crew cab trucks. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Looking for a mover and a seconder of that item. Moved by Councillor Van Merbergen, seconded by Councillor Helmer. The vote will now be opening on eScribe.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Moving on to scheduled items, we have a public participation meeting for street renaming portion of Darlington Place, Plan 33M-773. Looking for a mover and a seconder to open that public participation meeting. Councillor Cassidy moves it, and a seconder to open the PPM. Councillor Turner, thank you. Looking to see if there is anyone here. No one registered in advance, but, oh, sorry. You got to vote first. The vote's open.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. The PPM is now open and no one has registered for it. So looking for a mover and a seconder to close the PPM. Moved by Councillor Van Merbergen, seconded by Councillor Turner. The vote will now be opening on your screens.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you for that, committee. Moving into items for direction, we have item 4.1, which was sorry, look, now we're, sorry, guys. Item 3.1, mover and seconder to actually remove the recommendation from staff as the PPM is now closed. Okay, moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Cassidy, and the vote will be opening on your screens.
Would you allow a question on that before we vote, Chair?
Absolutely, please.
Thanks.
Sorry, we're just closing the vote, just to make sure that that's closed before any questions
But
proceed.
was that to close the PPM, Chair?
The PPM is done with no
Yeah.
people showing up, so we've just closed the vote to accept staff's recommendation. So
But how do we do that without opening for discussion, Chair? I mean, I understand accept moving and seconding a recommendation, but would we then not ask for any comments or questions?
yeah, so the voting is not happening at this moment, so questions can proceed.
Thank you.
Your worship.
Thanks very much. Question, if I can. I wouldn't normally get involved in this kind of question, except that issues around street names and all have taken up some interest within the community. And while it's a very nice name, I don't know that I have a feeling one way or another about barn swallows, but when we do that, do we look at the tradition of how the name came to be, like Darlington, for example, which I have no idea. The only Darlington I know is a nuclear power plant, but and what consideration the historic value of that name may or may not be, or do we just say it's a new day and maybe it's time for a change? Can I just understand that process a little bit better, please? Through you to staff, Chair.
Yep, to staff, please, to reply.
And through you, Madam Chair, it's Matt Feldberg from Development Services. So it's a bit awkward right now with the way that the policies are set up, and there was a motion back in September, I believe from Civic Works, asking staff to look more deeply at the street naming guidelines and the process which we undertake. That includes adding a bit of a diversity lens as well, and looking to improve some of those street names from that perspective. We're anticipating bringing our terms of reference to committee in the spring. We're just working through some details on that, so we'll have a little bit further information on that coming up shortly. As far as this particular street name, it was a request by the developer, Sifton Properties, to recognize the history of the former owners. I don't have a lot more detail than that at this point, but we did bring it through the MAG, which is our street renaming group that looks at it from more of a technical perspective to ensure there's no duplication and it's appropriate with emergency services. Hopefully that answers your question, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Your worship, a follow-up or comment or question?
Yeah, I think that's probably as good as it's going to get here. We'll await, I think, the larger project. Yeah, I'm not sure that's, I mean, I think that's as good as the answer can be, and I appreciate the response from staff, but we'll see what the next report looks like on the broader issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, looking at any further questions or comments from committee? Seeing none, as this item has been moved and seconded, we will open the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Moving on to items for direction. Communication was received from a resident who reached out earlier today asking that their letter be withdrawn, but still had some questions for staff in it. The clerk has prepared wording that she will read out to address the resident's desire and a way forward.
That the communication from A. Mercer dated December 29th, 2020 related to implementing speed bumps on Aldersbrook Gate be received It being noted that the author requested that the communication be withdrawn. It being further noted that the Civic Administration will review the current policy outlined in the above noted communication.
This item is in Councillor Morgan's ward. I spoke with him earlier today as well in regards to this item. The resident had raised some wording concerns about how the city does engagement, which staff is happy to review and look at and consider. This project is going to move forward with the speed bumps that was requested. The only remaining question from the resident to staff is, once an area is approved, when do speed bumps typically get installed? How does that construction season operate in general that the city does them? So that would be my question to staff, and then we can look for a mover and a seconder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we did receive a positive indication of neighborhood support for speed cushions on Aldersbrook Gate, and that will be proceeding this year. Projects are subject to the funding available and the indications of neighborhood support, which we have received. We try to group this work as much as possible so that we achieve efficiencies with respect to cost, and we currently also have a goal of applying traffic calming to all the school zones across the city. So there's a fair bit of work, and so the primary schedule driver is the time required to bundle all that work together and create an efficient and cost-effective process. So I can't commit specifically with respect to timing on the Aldersbrook Gate installation, but I can say that this work typically starts in the summer, and we do try to prioritize school zones in the summer before school restarts in the fall. But communications are going out to the neighborhood to provide them the indication of support, and we can provide supplementary indication of timing to this neighborhood given the level of interest.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Looking for a mover and a seconder from committee. Councillor Cassidy and Councillor Van Merbergen. Is there any further comments or questions in regards to this item prior to a vote? Seeing none, voting will now open.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you for that. Moving on to the deferred matters list. I did review some of the dates the other day with staff, and it will be revised for our next meeting, recognizing COVID has caused some delays throughout the city and within our departments. So looking for a motion to receive the deferred matters list with a mover and a seconder, and your worship, you're welcome to recuse yourself, as I believe you have a conflict in this one. Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. Seeing any further discussion? Seeing none, voting will be open.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0 with 1 abstain.
Okay. Yeah, seeing that there's no additional business on this agenda, thank you for the first meeting of the Civic Works Committee, and I wish you all a wonderful week. Oh, and motion to adjourn if you really want to go. Councillor Helmer, or Councillor Van Merbergen and Councillor Turner. The vote will now be opening. Oh, a hand vote, if you want to put your screens on and I can see you. Okay, everyone wants to go, so enjoy your weeks, and thank you, and we're adjourned.
Thanks, Madam Chair.